I didn't catch my wife in a hotel bed. I caught her cheating right in our kids' school while pretending to be a perfect mom.to the outside world. Our family looked flawless. We had the suburban house with the neat lawn, two kids who were always dressed in clean matching outfits, and my wife, who had built an online reputation as the supermom. Every post on her Instagram was staged to perfection. Pancake breakfasts with strawberries shaped like hearts, smiling family selfies at the park, endless captions about gratitude and family values. If you only saw her profile, you'd think she was living the dream. And for years, I believed it too. Before I continue, let me pause for a second. If you enjoy hearing real stories like this one, make sure to hit subscribe so you won't miss the twists, betrayals, and shocking turns that happen in everyday lives. Trust me, this one will keep you hooked until the end. Behind closed doors, things weren't as perfect as she made them look. She spent more time curating photos than actually being present with the kids. I'd come home from work and find our daughter coloring alone, while my wife posed with a smoothie bowl she didn't even touch. She started disappearing for volunteer projects and photo walks that always seemed to pop up right when I needed her most. Still, I told myself she was just busy, that she cared in her own way. I wanted to believe the image she projected online was at least partly real, but cracks started showing in the picture. Small things at first. Our son mentioning a new friend who gave him candy after school, even though no one knew had moved into our neighborhood. A neighbor casually mentioned seeing my wife across town on a day she claimed she was working on a school project. And then there were the photos she posted. One week she claimed we'd had a family picnic, but I was working that day, and the kids had been with my mom. I stared at the screen, realizing the blanket and the basket in that photo weren't even ours. That I remember one night when I walked into the kitchen, and she was carefully arranging plates of food she never intended for us to eat. She spent 20 minutes setting up the perfect shot, then tossed it into the trash because it had gone cold. The kids were already in bed, hungry after having cereal for dinner. That was the first time I really felt sick to my stomach, like something was deeply wrong. That it wasn't just about neglect. There was a pattern I couldn't ignore. She had a new energy after those volunteer events, a glow that didn't come from yoga or community service. She'd come home flushed, distracted, humming little tunes under her breath. She smelled different, not of perfume, but of coffee I knew she hated, or cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe I was jealous of her new hobbies. But then came the moment that changed everything. One of my coworkers, who also had kids in the same school district, mentioned offhand that he'd seen my wife in the parking lot, not alone, but laughing and walking arm in arm with another parent. The parent? A married man. Someone I knew from PTA meetings. That's when the truth started to hit me. My wife wasn't just faking her perfect mom persona for likes and followers. She was using it as a mask to hide an affair, right? In the same community where our children were supposed to feel safe, and I hadn't even begun to understand how twisted and complicated the web of lies really was. The night my coworker told me he'd seen my wife with another man, something inside me cracked. I didn't shout. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I started paying attention in a way I never had before. I stopped looking at the perfect pictures she painted online and started watching the in-between moments, the hurried glances, the awkward pauses, the little mistakes in her stories. That's when I noticed the first real slip. One morning, she left early, claiming she was headed to a wellness class. Later that day, I got home before her and found a florist's card accidentally delivered to our address. The envelope wasn't addressed to me. Inside, in messy handwriting, were just 3 words: until the blue hour. It didn't make sense at first, but when she came home, my kids repeated something she'd said in the car. Blue hour is mommy's favorite time. They thought it was a photography thing. I knew better. Someone else had given her that phrase. The little inconsistencies started multiplying. She'd come home with coffee cups, though she hated coffee. Once, she walked in wearing her blouse buttoned wrong, something she'd never do. And when I asked casually how her class was, she recited the same canned phrases. It was grounding. It was refreshing. Her answers felt rehearsed, like lines she'd memorized. I started connecting dots without ever touching her phone. I pulled up community schedules online, school volunteer signups, library room bookings, even city permits for park events. Every single time she claimed she was at a yoga class, there was also a wellness event listed under the school counselor's name. That was the man my coworker had seen her with. He wasn't just some random guy. He was a married father from our daughter's class. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. My wife wasn't just sneaking around. She was weaving her affair into the fabric of our children's lives. She was using school events, PTA meetings, even community workshops as her cover. Every time she claimed she was doing something good for the school, she was really doing something unspeakable behind closed doors that I remember one evening vividly. I went to pick up our daughter from art club, something my wife usually handled. When I walked in, I spotted her across the hall. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was leaning against the wall, laughing quietly with the counselor, their heads tilted too close, her hand brushing his arm. When she saw me, her whole face froze. She muttered something about checking schedules, grabbed her bag, and hurried off. The counselor avoided my eyes like a guilty teenager. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake replaying every smile, every excuse, every staged photo she'd ever posted. All of it felt poisoned. And yet, I didn't want to explode in anger. I wanted clarity. I wanted to know just how deep this rabbit hole went. So I became observant in ways she never expected. If she claimed she was on a photo walk, I'd notice her shoes. No dirt, no scuffs, not a trace of being outdoors. If she said she was at a planning session, I'd check the fridge. No food bought, no lists written. It wasn't detective work. It was just seeing the obvious things she thought no one would notice. The hardest part was the kids. They loved her. They had no idea. But children pick up on things adults ignore. One night, as I tucked my son in, he whispered, "Mommy's friend gave me candy again." My heart sank. He didn't understand the weight of what he was saying, but I did. My wife wasn't just lying to me. She was dragging our children into her lies, making them part of her cover that I knew then that if I confronted her too soon, she'd twist it, call me paranoid, maybe even make me look like the bad guy. No, I needed patience. I needed her to reveal herself, and deep down, I started forming an idea. If she was so obsessed with image, with looking perfect in front of others, then maybe the only way to truly expose her was to use that obsession against her. To put her on a stage where the mask couldn't hold that I didn't know exactly how yet. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to catch her in bed. I was going to catch her in broad daylight, in front of the very people she'd been fooling all along. And that thought was the only thing that let me close my eyes that night. The next week, I stopped asking where she'd been and started watching how she returned. She came home late one afternoon with cheeks flushed and a scarf knotted too carefully for spring. Her blouse showed a faint crease at the shoulder, the kind you get when someone's hand lingers a little too long. She breezed past me with a bright, brittle hey, went straight to the mirror, and fixed a smear of lipstick she never wore around me. It wasn't explicit. It didn't need to be at dinner. The kids did what kids do. They told the truth by accident. Our daughter said the school counselor had shown them a breathing game, just like mommy does in the hallway. Hallway, not classroom, not gym. The word landed like a dropped plate. My wife laughed it off, then pivoted to homework tips, talking too fast, pouring water into glasses already full that I knew then that confronting her in our kitchen would only give her room to act wounded. So I moved in daylight and stayed polite. The next morning I volunteered for pickup duty and arrived early. The school smelled like markers and floor polish. I signed in, took a slow lap, and paused by the multipurpose room. Through the narrow glass pane, I saw them, not touching, not even close, but standing in that too private angle two people use when they've forgotten anyone else exists. He whispered. She tilted her head, smiling with only the corner of her mouth. When a teacher crossed the hall, they sprang apart as if remembering where they were. I walked to the office and asked about starting a family skills night. Nothing controversial. Just parents sharing simple, helpful things. Time-saving recipes. Budgeting basics. Phone-free games. The secretary lit up. "We need that," she said, handing me a clipboard for an official request. I put my small business down as a sponsor and kept the concept painfully wholesome. I wasn't hunting scandal. I was building a stage where lies couldn't breathe. At home, I told my wife the school had asked for help with a family event. She looked relieved, even excited. "Finally something positive," she said. "I can do a segment on mindful routines with the counselor." The words fit too easily in her mouth. I nodded like it was a great idea, like the thought had never crossed my mind. Over the next few days, I watched her prep. She practiced a soft, instructive voice in the bathroom, tried on clothes that read as approachable, and rehearsed with an empty chair facing the window. Sometimes she stood too close to that chair, as if waiting for it to answer back. When she left for planning sessions, she returned with no flyers, no schedules, just that same bright, brittle smile and a scent like coffee shops I knew she never chose on her own. I met the counselor once more. On purpose this time, outside the school as he loaded boxes into his trunk. We shook hands. His grip was damp. "Big night coming," I said. He nodded too quickly, eyes sliding past me to the doors. "You're doing a segment with my wife?" I asked, friendly, curious. "If the schedule allows," he said, the kind of sentence you use when every schedule has already been written. That weekend, while the kids painted cardboard rockets at the table, I drafted a simple run of show, short demos, Q&A, nothing complicated. But I added two details that mattered. First, every presenter had to use a shared sign-in sheet with arrival and end times, visible on a community board in the hallway. Second, anyone leading a demo involving students had to provide a one-page handout for parents, printed, dated, and placed in a basket by the office before the event started. No exceptions. No last-minute improvisations. The principal loved it. "Structure," she said, tapping the page. "We need more of that." We scheduled Family Skills Night for a Thursday, parent-teacher conference week, when the building would be full of witnesses. Without me inviting a single 1.2 days before the event, my wife came home humming. She draped her new scarf over a chair and floated to the kitchen. "Big week," she said, kissing my cheek lightly. "I's already somewhere else. Don't be late Thursday." I promised I wouldn't. I put the kids to bed, then sat alone in the living room and let the quiet ring. If my plan worked, no shouting would be necessary. No traps, no ambushes, no cameras. Just a hallway, a clock, two signatures on a sheet, and a stack of handouts that couldn't exist in two places at once. I stared at that thought until it stopped feeling cruel and started feeling like mercy. Let the truth come out the way it always should. Plainly, in front of the doors our children walk through every day. Family Skills Night was set, and the school buzzed with preparations. My wife threw herself into it like she always did when there was a stage. She baked muffins she didn't let the kids touch, ironed outfits that matched too perfectly, and practiced her mindful parent speech in front of the bathroom mirror. She looked convincing, but I'd already seen the other side. The night of the event, the school parking lot overflowed with cars. Families streamed in carrying notebooks, water bottles, even toddlers clutching stuffed animals. I walked in with my kids holding each hand. My wife was already there, greeting parents with her practiced warmth. She wore that new scarf again, her stage costume. I called it silently. The sign-in board stood near the office, just as planned. Each parent volunteer had to write down their arrival time. I signed in, wrote my kids' names, and noticed two familiar signatures. My wife's, neat and rounded, and the counselor's, scribbled just beneath it. Both marked at nearly the same time. It could have been coincidence. But coincidence had stopped existing weeks ago.as the event began. The gym transformed into a patchwork of little stations. A dad teaching budget-friendly meals. A mom showing quick science projects. Two grandparents leading old-fashioned games. The air buzzed with laughter and chatter. Kids darted between tables, collecting stickers for each activity. My wife's table was set with candles, mats, and a printed banner. Mindful routines for families. I hovered near the back, watching her. She moved with polished grace, demonstrating breathing exercises, guiding kids to close their eyes, counting softly. Parents nodded along, impressed. She looked every bit the serene, selfless mother she portrayed online. The counselors stood nearby, pretending to help with materials, handing out slips of paper he'd promised were instructions. But when I checked the handout basket by the office, there was nothing with their names on it. Every other presenter had turned theirs in hours before. Theirs were missing. I said nothing, just walked back, leaning casually against the bleachers. Midway through the night, a teacher approached the mic. "Next, we'll have a short demo from our mindfulness team. Mrs. underscore 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 and Mr. underscore underscore." Applause scattered across the gym. My wife flushed with excitement, stepping forward. The counselor followed, a little too close. They launched into their act. Breathing techniques. phrases about presence and gratitude. It was polished, almost rehearsed. Too rehearsed. Their voices overlapped as if they'd practiced in private, and I could see the way her eyes flicked to him for cues, not to the audience. Then came the slip. A mother in the audience raised her hand. "Will you have copies of this for us to take home?" My wife answered quickly, "Of course, they're in the basket by the office." She said it smoothly, confidently, without hesitation, except I'd already checked. The basket was empty. The counselor froze for half a beat, then added, "Yes, we submitted them earlier." His tone was sharp, defensive, a little too fast. Parents glanced at one another, murmuring. A few headed toward the office to look for themselves. The principal, who prided herself on structure, frowned from the sidelines. "We'll double-check," she said into the mic, her voice calm but clipped. My wife's cheeks turned crimson. The counselors shuffled papers at random, pulling out sheets that clearly belonged to another station. I stood very still, holding my son's hand as he tugged at my sleeve, asking when it was our turn to try the science table. I bent down, whispered, "Soon, buddy." Inside, I felt the weight of the trap tightening, not by my hand, but by theirs. The evening wound down. Families packed up crafts and leftovers. My wife avoided my eyes, busying herself with cleanup. The counselor slipped out a side door before anyone could corner him. The principal announced she'd follow up with presenters about missing materials, her voice polite but loaded. Driving home, my wife sat stiff in the passenger seat, the kids drowsy in the back. She murmured something about forgetting to print and misplacing the file. Her excuses tangled in her throat. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. She had already lied in front of an entire room, and people had noticed. That night, after the kids were asleep, I found her pacing the kitchen, scarf still looped around her shoulders like armor. "You set me up," she said flatly. Not a question. A statement. I met her eyes and answered just as flatly. "No, you set yourself up." For the first time in years. She didn't have a rehearsed reply. The morning after family skills night, the cracks widened. At breakfast, my wife barely touched her coffee. She scrolled through her phone, pretending to read emails, while the kids chattered about the rockets they'd made. Normally, she'd seize those moments for photos, but not that morning. She avoided the camera like it could burn her. Later that day, I stopped by the school to drop off some supplies for my daughter's art class. The secretary, a sharp-eyed woman who never missed a detail, leaned across the counter. "Funny about last night," she said softly. "We never found those handouts." The principal isn't happy. She raised her brows, waiting for me to comment. I just shrugged, feigning ignorance, though inside my chest pounded. The lie had landed in the very place my wife valued most, her public image. That evening, my wife tried to patch the hole. She printed a batch of generic worksheets, pulled straight from the internet, and claimed she'd meant to use these. But the timestamps on the files betrayed her. The print job was from that very afternoon. The principal wasn't fooled. Neither were the parents who'd gone looking the night before. It wasn't only about the missing papers. People had noticed her chemistry with the counselor. One dad from our block stopped me on the sidewalk. "She seems close with Mr. _____," he said carefully, the way someone drops a hint without wanting to get involved. Another mom messaged me later that week. "Is everything okay?" She looked nervous up there. The walls she'd built, her perfect mom brand, her flawless volunteer image, were paper thin, and they were starting to tear. I kept quiet at home. I didn't accuse, didn't demand. I just let her twist in the silence. When she paced the kitchen rehearsing excuses, I'd nod vaguely. When she tried to spin new stories for the kids, I was so busy printing handouts ahead of time, I must have left them in the car. I stayed neutral. The less I said, the more she filled the void with her own tangled lies. One afternoon, I accidentally ran into the counselor in the school parking lot. He was unloading boxes again, this time labeled wellness grant supplies. I asked if he needed help. He nearly dropped the box at the sound of my voice. No, I've got it," he stammered. His face flushed red, his shirt collar damp with sweat though the day was cool. "You two did a great job last week," I said evenly. "Shame about the missing materials." His eyes flicked up, then away. "It was a mix-up," he muttered. "Just a mix-up." He slammed the trunk shut like he was afraid of what else I might see inside. I walked away, leaving him to stew in his own nerves. That's when I realized something important. The affair wasn't just emotional. It was logistical. They weren't sneaking off to motels. They were using the school itself as their shield. The wellness grant gave them excuses to meet. The events gave them cover. And my wife's obsession with image gave her the confidence to believe no one would ever question her. But now people were questioning. And whispers, once started, spread faster than any rumor online to AT home. The tension grew thick. My wife stopped posting photos as often, worried someone might notice inconsistencies. She grew short with the kids, snapping at them when they mentioned the counselor's name. She hovered over me at dinner, searching my face for signs. Did I know? Had I figured it out? I kept my mask calm, steady, ordinary. Inside, I was already planning the next step. If paperwork and schedules were their shield, then paperwork and schedules would also be their downfall. I began quietly gathering public records, grant applications, PDA minutes, newsletters. Nothing illegal, nothing invasive. Just the paper trail they thought no one cared about. The truth was right there, in black and white. Dates, times, signatures. And every one of them carried the fingerprints of their lies that I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to build a wall of their own words, their own documents. So tall they couldn't climb over it. And when the time came, I'd let them collapse under the weight of the lies they'd written themselves. The more I pieced together, the clearer it became. Their affair wasn't fueled by passion alone. It was engineered by convenience. The counselor had his wellness grant. My wife had her volunteer projects. And together they stitched an alibi that looked noble on the outside, but hollow up. Close point one evening. After putting the kids to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of public documents spread before me. PDA newsletters, city budget reports, school announcements. Each one told a small part of the story. Taken together, they formed a crooked map that on Tuesday, the grant log claimed a nutrition seminar was held. That same night, my wife posted a picture of family taco night. I knew we hadn't eaten tacos. The kids had chicken nuggets while she disappeared for hours. On Thursday, the counselor signed out gym equipment for a wellness demo. Yet the school janitor noted the gym was empty. My wife's calendar that day said she was at yoga. Yoga, nutrition, wellness. All perfect words to mask what really happened. Stolen hours behind locked doors that I didn't imagine what they did in those hours. I didn't need to. The evidence was in the rhythm, in how their lies overlapped like two rehearsed voices in a play. The next week, I attended a PDA meeting. My wife sat across the room, radiant as always, nodding along to discussions about bake sales and library fundraisers. The counselor hovered near the coffee table, smiling too widely at everyone. When the treasurer mentioned the wellness grant, both of them stiffened almost imperceptibly. I caught it. So did two other parents, if their exchanged glances meant what I thought they did. During the break, I approached the treasurer casually. Mind if I look at the grant file sometime? I asked. She blinked, surprised, but shrugged. It's public record. Come by the office anytime. That night, my wife asked why I seemed so quiet. I smiled, kissed her cheek, and said, just tired. She searched my eyes like she was trying to read a language she'd forgotten. Then she looked away. A few days later, I visited the school office and flipped through the grant folder. Receipts, schedules, sign-in sheets. There it was, my wife's neat handwriting on forms she never told me about, her signature side by side with his. I ran my finger over the ink, not in anger, but in grim confirmation. Their affair wasn't a rumor. It was archived in school records, stamped with dates and initials. When I left the office, I didn't take a single page with me. I didn't have to. The truth was preserved already, buried in official paper that couldn't be erased. That weekend, at a neighborhood cookout, I saw the counselor arrive with his wife and kids. My wife waved from across the yard, a little too brightly, as if daring me to react. I didn't. Instead, I chatted with his wife about school schedules, watching her expression soften when I asked innocent questions. Did he mention the extra wellness nights? They've been adding so many lately. Her brow furrowed. She shook her head. The cracks weren't just in my marriage anymore. They were spreading, touching other families, other lives. And the more they tried to patch them with smiles and excuses, the more obvious the damage became to AT home. My wife grew restless. She scrolled less, posted fewer pictures, as if afraid the lens itself might betray her. She started overcompensating, planning elaborate dinners, initiating family game nights, laughing too loud at jokes that weren't funny. The kids sensed it. Our daughter asked me quietly, Why does mom act different when people are watching? I hugged her tight and said, because sometimes people pretend when they're scared. The truth was, my wife wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared of losing her image. And I was going to use that fear, not to humiliate her in private, but to strip away the mask in public. In the very arena she thought made her untouchable, the stage was set. All I had to do was let her walk onto it. The idea came to me on a quiet Sunday morning. My wife was upstairs staging a family breakfast photo, arranging pancakes we hadn't eaten in months. The kids sat at the table with cereal while she angled plates toward the window for better light. I watched from the hallway, and it hit me. She lived for curated moments, not real ones. That's when the plan crystallized. If her entire life was built on carefully staged images, then the truth could only destroy her if it appeared in the same frame she'd been trying to control. I didn't need private detectives or hacked phones. I needed a stage where reality stood side by side with her fiction through my small business. I proposed a community event, Truth in Focus, a family photo exhibit. The concept was wholesome and impossible to refuse. Parents and kids showcasing unedited snapshots of family life. The only requirement was that each photo had to be submitted with its original file, complete with metadata, the hidden timestamps and locations most people ignored. A local gallery donated the space, and the PDA backed the idea immediately. My wife lit up when I told her. "This is perfect," she said, hugging me with an enthusiasm I hadn't felt in years. "I can show how important it is to be present with your kids." She didn't even realize the irony. She volunteered on the spot to curate part of the exhibit with the counselor. In the weeks leading up, the house felt like a rehearsal studio. She practiced speeches in front of the mirror, printed glossy enlargements of staged photos, and scrolled endlessly for captions that sounded authentic. The counselor stopped by once under the pretense of checking the layout. They spoke in low tones in the living room while I chopped vegetables in the kitchen, every word like static under my skin. When he left, she floated upstairs, humming like she'd just been cast in the role of her life. But behind her performance, I was building the real show. I coordinated with the gallery director, making sure every file submitted was backed up, its timestamp displayed discreetly beside the print. Most families didn't care, their photos were genuine. But my wife and the counselor? They relied on illusion. And metadata doesn't lie. The night of the exhibit arrived. The gallery buzzed with parents, teachers, and neighbors admiring candid snapshots. Muddy sneakers after soccer, bedtime stories, kids baking cookies with flour on their noses. Laughter filled the room. It smelled of coffee and finger foods. Then I spotted my wife's section. Her photos glowed under soft lights. Children meditating on mats, staged family dinners, volunteer workshops with smiling parents. They looked flawless. Too flawless. The counselor hovered nearby, straightening frames, his eyes flicking toward her every few seconds. When the gallery director stepped up to the microphone to welcome everyone, my chest tightened. She thanked sponsors, praised the honesty of community families, then added, "As part of our effort to celebrate transparency, each display includes original metadata, showing when and where the photos were captured." She gestured toward the plaques beside each frame. It was subtle, almost boring to most. But I saw the counselor blanch. My wife's smile froze. Parents leaned in to read the small prints, timestamps that contradicted captions, locations that didn't match the stories. One photo labeled "Family Picnic, July 14th, was tagged at an office building across town. Another, "Wellness Class, Saturday," carried a weekday timestamp during school hours. Whispers rose around the room. A mom near me frowned. "Didn't she post this as a weekend activity?" Another dad muttered. "That was the same night they skipped practice." The murmurs spread like cracks through glass that I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let the weight of their own lies hang in the air. My wife tried to laugh it off, making excuses about technical glitches and camera errors. The counselor stammered about file transfers. But metadata doesn't blush, doesn't lie, doesn't cover for you. By the time the crowd drifted to the next section, their reputations were bleeding out in silence. And for the first time, I felt the shift. It wasn't just me who saw it anymore. It was everyone. The morning after the exhibit, the silence in our house was heavier than any argument. My wife moved through the kitchen like a ghost, pouring orange juice into glasses no one asked for, clinking plates a little too hard. The kids noticed. "Why is mom sad?" my daughter whispered. I told her gently. Sometimes when people pretend too much, it makes them tired. By noon, the whispers had turned into calls. A mom from our daughter's class rang my phone. She didn't mince words. "Those pictures, the times don't match what she said." A lot of parents are upset. They feel misled. Her tone wasn't angry, just disappointed. The kind of disappointment that cuts deeper than rage. Later that week, the PDA group chat buzzed nonstop. Parents asked questions that didn't need answers. Why were photos of weekend family events tagged during school hours? Why were community workshops located in office buildings instead of gyms? The counselor's name appeared too often in the background. My wife tried to spin it with frantic messages. Glitch with the files. My phone always messes up the timestamps. But once people doubt you, every word feels like another L. I eat a at home. She unraveled faster. She deleted half her Instagram feed overnight, erasing years of curated perfection. She snapped at the kids when they asked simple questions. One evening, she grabbed my arm and demanded, "Did you do this? Did you set me up with that exhibit?" Her eyes were wild, searching my face for guilt. I just looked at her calmly and said, "I didn't need to set you up. You did this yourself." She pulled away like the words burned. The counselor wasn't faring any better. His wife cornered him after the exhibit, I heard later from a neighbor. She'd started checking the grant paperwork herself, questioning his late nights and school projects. Word spread quickly. He'd been seen slipping out of the gallery early, avoiding parents. His reputation, once clean, now carried a stain that wouldn't wash out. The principal, ever professional, sent a polite email, due to concerns about record discrepancies. The PDA will be reviewing wellness grant activities. That was her way of saying the hammer was about to fall. And yet, through all of it, my wife kept clinging to her mask. One night, she cooked a 3-course meal, set the table with candles, and acted like nothing had happened. Halfway through, she raised her glass and forced a smile. "We can fix this. We just need to present better next time." That's when I realized she wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing the audience. The kids, though, couldn't be fooled. Our son pushed his plate away and said, "I don't like when mommy pretends." The room went dead quiet. My wife's eyes filled with tears, but she still didn't confess. She couldn't. I put the kids to bed and sat alone in the living room, listening to her upstairs, pacing like a caged animal. I thought about every small choice that had led us here. Every fake smile, every photo stage for strangers, every excuse whispered too fast. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd betrayed the people who trusted her, the community, and worst of all, our children. The stage I'd built was only the beginning. The next act wasn't about whispers or metadata. It was about consequences, the kind that leave no room for pretending. And I knew exactly how to deliver it. The night before the PDA review meeting, I barely slept. Not because I was nervous, but because I was ready. Everything had led to this moment. Not a screaming match in our kitchen, not a dramatic confrontation in a bedroom, but a clean, undeniable reveal in the one place my wife never imagined she could lose, her stage. The cafeteria was packed that evening. Parents filled the folding chairs, teachers stood along the walls, and the principal sat at the front with a folder of grant records. My wife swept in wearing her brightest smile, scarf draped like armor. The counselor followed, stiff in a suit that looked borrowed, his wife trailing a step behind, arms folded. I sat near the back, kids at home with my mom, notebook in hand. The meeting began with routine matters, budget updates, upcoming field trips, until the principal cleared her throat. Next item, review of wellness grant documentation. She opened the folder, and the room shifted. Papers rustled. Parents leaned forward. The principal read dates and signatures aloud. July 14th, documented as a wellness seminar. Attendance listed as Mrs. underscore 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 and Mr. underscore underscore underscore. Cross-checked against building logs. The school was closed that evening. Murmurs rippled across the room. The counselor shifted in his chair. My wife's smile faltered. The principal continued. August 9th, nutrition workshop. Sign-in sheets show both names. Security footage confirms only custodial staff were present. She set the papers down, her eyes sharp. There are multiple instances like this. We need explanations. My wife jumped in first. There must be a mistake. We definitely held those events. Her voice was shrill, rehearsed confidence cracking. The counselor followed, voice tight. We did small group sessions, informal, not always recorded. Parents weren't buying it. A father stood. Funny, because my son was here that night for basketball practice. He said the gym was empty. Another mother added, and you said that Saturday class was family-oriented, but the timestamps show it was during school hours. Who was it for? The room buzzed with questions, each sharper than the last. My wife's hands trembled as she gripped her scarf. The counselor's wife finally spoke, voice cold as stone. Enough. Stop lying. I've seen the records. I've seen the photos. Gasps swept through the room. The counselor's face drained of color. For once, I didn't have to say a word. Their own signatures, their own stories, had cornered them. The principal, keeping her tone professional, closed the folder. Until this is resolved, the grant is suspended. And given the inconsistencies, I'll be forwarding this to the district board. Her gaze lingered on my wife, then the counselor. This community deserves honesty. Silence hung heavy. My wife looked at me across the room, eyes wide, desperate, as if begging me to step in to rescue her. I met her gaze calmly, steadily, then looked away. When the meeting adjourned, the crowd dispersed in a low roar of whispers. Some parents avoided her, others stared openly. The counselor's wife walked out without him. He scrambled after her, pleading. My wife stayed frozen in her chair, smile finally gone. I walked past her slowly. She whispered, "You did this." I leaned close, just enough for her to hear. "No, you did this." And then I walked away, leaving her sitting in the wreckage of her own lies. The mask finally shattered. That night, I didn't feel rage or triumph. Just relief. The clean cut had been made. There was no going back. The days after the PTA meeting were strangely quiet. My wife avoided neighbors, deleted more of her online life, and spent long hours in the bedroom scrolling through nothing. She still tried to put on a mask at home, cooking elaborate meals, pretending things were fine, but the illusion had already collapsed. The kids didn't trust her smiles anymore, and neither did anyone else that I filed for divorce calmly, without theatrics. There was no screaming match, no shattered plates. Just signatures and papers, the same way she and the counselor had written themselves into a corner. The irony wasn't lost on me. When the dust settled, the court granted me primary custody. I think the judge saw what the kids already knew, who had been present, and who had only been pretending. The counselor's wife left him. Word spread fast in our community. He transferred to another district, his reputation in tatters. My wife, stripped of her curated image, moved out quietly. The scarf she once wore like armor sat forgotten in a box by the door. For me, life didn't just move on, it grew. I sold the house with its staged rooms and moved into a smaller place with bigger windows, where the kids and I could breathe. I started a weekend photo club for local dads and their kids. No fake smiles, no perfect lighting. Just muddy sneakers, messy pancakes, and laughter that didn't need a filter. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I sat alone, wondering how I had missed the warning signs for so long. But slowly, I realized the truth. I hadn't missed them. I just wanted to believe in the picture she painted. Now, I no longer needed illusions. The kids flourished. My daughter discovered a love for painting. My son started soccer and beamed every time I cheered from the sidelines. They didn't care about curated photos. They cared about someone who showed up. And I was there. Every time. As for me, I found peace in the small, unfiltered moments, reading bedtime stories, cooking meals that actually got eaten, taking photos that didn't need editing. The life I'd built wasn't staged. It was real, and it was mine. So what do you think? Did I make the right choice walking away instead of exploding in anger? Should I have handled it differently? What would you have done in my place? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Hit the like button if it kept you hooked, and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.